Hey guys! It's been so long since I sat down and filmed. I think it was a month ago, so it feels kind of strange to be sat back here, but it's the Easter weekend and I've got loads of time, so I thought I'd film a big batch of videos. And I'm not sure when this is going up, so now I've let you all know that it's been filmed for ages in advance and I have been too lazy to edit and upload it. But there we go. So today I'm talking about my 5 favourite Gothic texts, because Gothic literature is one of my favourite genres. It's up there with, I don't know, like young adult fiction. It's probably kind of, yeah, it's probably pretty much at the top. It's one of those ones where I've studied it in so much depth that I know quite a bit about the kind of history of Gothic literature and the kind of the way it's developed and how new Gothic literature compares to like original Gothic literature. So yeah, today I'm basically talking about my 5 favourite texts. So if you're into Gothic literature and you haven't read these, you absolutely need to, because they're so different and they bring so much in that if you read all 5 you get to know kind of a lot about the genre and you get kind of a great overview. I've been really ill all week as well, so my throat is still not 100%, which is why I keep sounding like I'm losing my voice. I'm not, it's just giving up the will to live. So text number 1 is The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. I don't actually own a physical copy of this, but I've read it so many times. It's a poem, if you didn't know. I think I first heard it when it was parodied on an episode of The Simpsons. It was on a Treehouse Horror episode, and it's just the rhythm of it, the raven that comes tap tap tapping at my chamber door, and it just kind of, it shows Edgar Allan Poe's skill as a poet. I think it's quite a long one, but it draws the idea of like mental health into Gothic literature, which is a really key component of it in my opinion. And yeah, it's his most famous work, or one of his most famous works. And I think if you take it with another of his poems that's my favourite, called Annabel Lee, which is one of my favourite poems of all time, it really shows, it just has so many kind of core Gothic emblems in it. There's graves and the raven and kind of just a lot of darkness. So I'll put a link to both of the poems online below so you can read them if you want. And then, if I don't hit myself with it, it's my favourite book of all time. So this is Wuthering Heights. I'm really sad that I don't have a prettier copy, but this one, I think I had 2 copies, but I've read this a couple of times. It's a Gothic romance and I'm a bit of a sucker for a good romance. So it's the story of Cathy and Heathcliff, who grow up as children together. They live in Yorkshire. Cathy's part of a family that are not super rich but well-to-do, and Heathcliff is a kind of gypsy boy that Cathy's father adopts. So they're kind of brought up as brother and sister, but throughout there's an awareness that he is not part of the family. Heathcliff is of a lower class to them and not really worthy of anybody's time. Cathy's got a brother, I believe, that's not very nice, and he basically does all he can to get Heathcliff into trouble. But Heathcliff and Cathy are very, very dark inside. They've got these kind of dark souls of, they hate everybody and I kind of love it. They're very angry at the world and they hate their neighbours called the Lintons, who are kind of characters that you'd see as the main characters in an Austen novel. They're all very prim and proper and they do what their parents say, and Cathy and Heathcliff just absolutely detest them. And it's a very long love story where their love doesn't work out, and it's kind of like a narrative within a narrative within a narrative, and I love the kind of layers of the story. And it's something that will take you a bit of time to go through because it is quite long, but I think it's just an absolutely incredible book. It talks about, yeah, just the dark side of love, which you didn't really see very often back in kind of this time in novels. I promise I won't talk about the others as much as that. So next up is Frankenstein. There's 2 different Frankenstein texts. the 1818 one, which is the earlier one, and there's a later one, which a lot of people think that Percy Shelley, who's also a poet and was married to Mary Shelley, rewrote or kind of went over a bit. So although I studied the later text at school, I studied the 1818 text at uni, and Frankenstein is all about a man called Frankenstein who creates a monster. He manages to create life, and unlike the kind of popular like interpretation of it, the monster is basically a baby at first, and you get told the kind of story of how he grows up first from Frankenstein's perspective, and you do think he's awful and he's created this kind of like, yeah, this monster, this demon, and then you get told from the monster's perspective and everything is reversed, and you see how perhaps the creator was actually the monster rather than Frankenstein, and there's this duality between the two characters that's kind of quite key in Gothic texts. So yeah, also it's not very long and it's definitely something you should read, even if just to realise that it's the scientist, not the monster that's called Frankenstein. But there's actually quite a few criticisms to say that it's very interesting that that kind of perspective has happened in modern day culture, because you think that, yeah, the monster and Frankenstein becomes so similar that, yeah, I don't know, a lot of critics quite like it in a way. And fourth is The Monk, by Matthew Lewis, which is actually the most recent Gothic text I've read, and I adored it. This is one of the earlier ones, so I think it's written about, yeah, it's written in 1796, so it's a solid like 30 or 20 years before Frankenstein, and then it's a lot earlier than Wuthering Heights and Dracula, I believe. And this is kind of a bit of a, not an attack on the Catholic Church, but it's a very, very different interpretation to what you would normally read from this time. It's all about, there's so much kind of actual horror, and it was like genuinely scary. This is kind of, yeah, this is more horror than like suspense that you see in a lot of other original Gothic novels. So it's all about a monk that actually is a murderer. There's also a woman that pretends to be a monk to get close to the monk that she loves, so obviously that's a bit like not brilliant. She's pretending to be a man, and she manages to like dupe all the other monks and get in and basically spend loads of time with the man that she loves in a way that definitely subverts the Catholic religion. And in the end, everything kind of is shown to be very, very corrupt, and I probably haven't explained it very well because it was about a year ago that I've read it, and I've only read it once, whereas the others I've read a few times. But yeah, this is one that's like, I think is very, very underrated, and for that reason, we should all read it. And finally, I've got Dracula. I love this copy of it. I actually read Dracula a lot later than most other people. I read it when I was probably at uni, so I was about 19, 20, and so many people were like, how have you not read Dracula yet? And I studied it from a feminist perspective, which is quite interesting to look at all Gothic novels from that kind of perspective. But yeah, Dracula is obviously the story of a vampire named Dracula, or a man that's suspected to be a vampire, and there's a lot of kind of weird sucking of women's blood and turning into bats, and it is so, so good. It's like where the original obsession with vampires came from, and what more could you want? So yeah, there's like a lot of different themes from the kind of like Gothic canon throughout those. There's the supernatural, which happens with Frankenstein and Dracula. There's kind of like this suppression of women, and there's a lot of questions about women's sexuality and how women can be perverse, which is in Wuthering Heights, Dracula, Frankenstein. It's basically in all of them, that one. And yeah, the Edgar Allan Poe poetry like draws on like deep rhythms. Like the Raven has, as I mentioned before, it's got this kind of like deep like drum style rhythm, and yeah, they're basically my 5 favourites. So if you're going to get cracking on reading Gothic literature, I think you should start with these. and this was meant to be a short video and it's definitely not. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you again soon. Bye!